Mankind was born on Earth. It was never meant to die here.
You're the best pilot we ever had, and this is the mission we were trained for.
We have a plan to find a planet that can habitate the people that are living on the Earth.
You have no idea when you're coming back.
I'm coming back.
Every hour on that planet will be 7 years back on Earth.
Oh, you're not prepared for this. Our mission does not work if the people on Earth are dead by the time we pull it off.
You might have to decide between seeing your children again and the future of the human race.
All right, Enrique!
Hang on! We'll find a way. We always have.
Interstellar, in theaters and IMAX November 7th.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to a very special episode of Back in the Blockbuster today. It's your hosts, Gaius and Jackson. Happy to jump on the podcast today and talk about a very, very special movie, something that's very important to me personally, where, of course, it's finally that time. It's an episode I've been waiting to record, I think, since I joined all that time ago, because it is the 10th anniversary of Interstellar, and I am featuring, for those maybe watching, I just picked up a 4K of this bad boy. Funny story, I'll get into that when we talk about this viewing experience. But needless to say, I needed another copy, and this was on sale at Walmart for like $20, like 2 days after I watched it recently. And yeah, instant snag. Very happy. I'm probably one of my favorites in my collection after I saw this. So yeah, very happy to be chatting this movie today. And I know that you like this movie a lot too, and you graciously let me intro because I know it's been no secret how much I love this movie, and we'll get into all that. But yeah, I'm very excited. This is gonna be a great episode, so very looking forward to the conversation.
I'm also excited that your Walmart has physical copies of Interstellar on 4K.
Yes, I meant to follow that up. I don't know how much longer that we'll have physical media at our Walmarts in Canada, but for now, at least, it still seems like they're on board. So, but probably won't last much longer.
Yeah. I know ours does not. I mean, I'd probably be able to find like a recent release of something, maybe, but to find Interstellar at Walmart would be like a diamond in the
on
rough,
4K, no less. Yeah,
yeah, 4K,
for $20.
For $20, yeah, that, yeah. So, I must say that I'm very happy that we're doing this because, I love horror movies, but we had a lot of those in a row. We did. Of course, you and I had The Descent and Event Horizon to kind of finish up Tales of Horror, and I was like, all right, that's over. And then I had the 40th anniversary for A Nightmare on Elm Street last week, and I was like, oh wait, not quite. So it's nice. I don't want everyone to think that like we're shifting into like a horror movie podcast. So this is very nice that we were able to talk about something that's not horror and completely different. And the reason I even reached out to you to like do this one, because like as everyone knows that you've been really busy, and I was like, hey, check out the anniversary list, and they were like, yeah, I'll check it out. And then I looked at the one in November, and I was like, well, Interstellar turns 10. You brought it up early on the show, like around the time you first joined, as like a personal like favorite or one of your personal favorites. So when I saw that the anniversary was coming up, I was like, oh well, he has to be on that one. So let's make the time to do that. And that is exactly what we did. And I mean, a good one to make time for. Also a lot to take in. We talked about these a bit where some of the anniversaries we cover, there's not really a lot to dive into per se. It's not really like necessarily deep movies, but we have 2 hours and 49 minutes of pure cinema here. Yeah. And that just pretty like visually groundbreaking. Story-wise, it's pretty groundbreaking. The acting this time around for me watching it, I mean, I liked it before, but it hit me a little bit differently this time around. And I was also surprised to learn two things, I guess, because I never looked it up. As far as it's like scientific accuracy, it's considered like one of, if not the best science fiction movies in that regard. Like some people think it's even better than 2001: Space Odyssey, and when it comes to that. And then on the other flip side of that, I was surprised that the Rotten Tomato score is not higher. It's 73%.
And a 74 Metascore. I know, that always surprises me.
Which astounded me a bit, because I guess I assume that like all of his movies are not like this got bad reviews or anything, but I thought like more universally loved. And when I looked at the bad reviews, it seemed like they not even bad. I would say mixed, where they were saying that visually the movie was stronger than like they think it has pacing issues. There's like script issues, dialogue issues. They think some of the stuff on the ship kind of plods along. It's kind of slow. It felt like more nitpicking than like saying the movie was bad.
Which is it's hard to call any of Christopher Nolan's movies like objectively bad. There's obviously going to be your naysayers, but I'm sure you're right when it comes down. Honestly, though, and it could be complete bias, nothing like I don't think there's a minute of screen time wasted in this movie. I really would struggle to come up with anything other than maybe some dialogue. Like Nolan's a great writer. Sometimes I find his dialogue can be a little bit corny in places. I don't really struggle with it in this movie per se. But yeah, I mean, people are going to say what they're going to say, but this movie to this day, whenever I see videos in like short form about Interstellar, I'll see like a TikTok from a scene, or I'll see the audio or hear the audio from this soundtrack featured in another video. There's nothing but universal acclaim for this movie, and anywhere I look for it. So the score is a little weird that I wouldn't say how low it is, but that it is what it is. Like this would seem, I think it's in the IMDb top 250 for sure, but I think it's actually quite high on that list.
Oh, I wasn't sure. Are all his movies? Well, not all of them. They're not all of his movies. I'm just thinking about that.
Good chunk, but not all. That's for sure.
Because Insomnia is not. I was just thinking about that.
I'm glad you brought up the comparison to 2001: A Space Odyssey, because I mean that there was a time where I'd seen this and I'd not seen 2001, but since seeing 2001 now a few times, and probably more. It was more in my mind while watching Interstellar, my most previous watch, like a couple weeks ago, than it ever was before. Like there are some very, very clear inspirations from that movie, and it's just really heartwarming to see. Like I don't think we have Interstellar without 2001: A Space Odyssey, and they're both just amazing technical and visual, groundbreaking sci-fi movies. So both amazing. Yeah.
For anyone that doesn't know, we are a little past the anniversary. It came out on November 7th, 2014. To take you back, this is something I saw in theaters. I don't know. You could have. I mean, it's so.
I did.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
This is one of those rare ones.
It's usually that's not the case. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So, what was your first experience like, and what has it been like, kind of being in your life since then?
So. I think I've like kind of touched on it before on the show, but this was like I've commonly said that this is, and it sounds so corny to say it like this, but like it's just how it is, and like there's no other way to say it. Like this is definitely the movie that inspired my love for cinema. Like I kind of really, when I was watching it for the first time in theaters, I'll get more into the details, but particularly like the wormhole or the black hole scene, like when he's behind the bookcase, which I know spoilers for down the road in the movie, but like it was a moment where like my jaw hit the floor and I kind of realized like what movies really were capable of doing, like storytelling wise and with visuals. Like the black hole in this movie, when you take the time to consider, like at this point, just for some context, I was 16 when this movie came out in theaters. I liked Nolan, I liked the Batman trilogy, but like I said, I wasn't like really as into film as I am now. Right. So I knew a little bit here and there, but when you take the time to consider like the black hole scene, when you see that, like obviously as a 16-year-old watching, I'm like, this looks pretty incredible to see in a movie, but I don't know what he's working with. I don't know any of the techniques, if it's CGI, if it's practical, that's all beyond me at this point. But like to consider that when that was filmed and this was produced, like that was before there were even any real photographs of black holes before by a few years. It's pretty incredible to see that shot next to like the actual, I can't remember, I would never know what it's called, but there is a black hole that's been documented since this movie's come out. And when you compare those, it's pretty unbelievable, like how accurate the visuals and the physics in this movie is. It's still something that really, really I contribute to like why this movie's so fantastic and why it holds up so well over time, is just how, as heady as these scientific concepts are, they're all grounded in reality, even if that's hard to conceive. And I think that's just something that really, there's something new to find every time I watch this movie. But yeah, so long story short, saw it in theaters. Instantly, I'd kind of becoming at the time I was sort of getting more into movies and liking movies more than I'd say like my classmates at the time. And then I saw this and it was like no going back. I was like completely hooked. I started watching movies all the time, getting into like directors and who directed what, collaborations, following what filmmakers were making what next. Like this really kicked it off for me. So that's why it has that special place in my heart. And I've revisited it. It's probably among the movies I've seen the most, like without a doubt, but I couldn't really quantify it. I would say probably 10 at least.
Yeah.
But after the last time I saw it, because I have a really good buddy, Chris, that loves this movie too, and we'd seen it a couple times together, and I wanted to put some distance between it so that I could try and replicate that feeling of, obviously I remember everything when I see it, but exactly the feeling of awe, that's exactly what I had felt when I saw it in theaters, was awe, like jaw on the ground. And even it had been a few years, but I've seen it so many times that like everything comes back to me when I watch it. But it was nice to have, I'd say I probably put 3 years in between my last watch of it. And it was great. I showed my girlfriend this movie for the first time, and I was kind of hesitant what you'd think about it. Cause like I said, like you said, it's a almost 3 hour long, heady scientific sci-fi action movie. And that's not for everybody. Like my mom doesn't like this movie because is pretty anti-sci-fi.
Yeah.
But Caine, we watched it together. It was probably among the most invested I'd ever seen her in a movie that we've watched. And credit to her, she completely trusts my judgment in movies. And I've showed her some weird, strange ass movies before, but she loved it. She's wanted to watch something like this since then. She was totally engaged. It was really great to show somebody else this movie for the first time, because I don't think I've had that opportunity before. And it's like movie magic.
My experience, I mean, I saw it in theaters as well. And what has always like bothered me personally, because I love Christopher Nolan, right? And and I remember seeing it with a group of friends, and they were so emotionally invested in it. And then I was like, I remember turning at my friend Jackie at the time, was sitting next to her, and I just remember I could hear her sobbing, and I was like, not. And I was like thinking to myself, like, dude, am I broken or something? Why am I not like feeling this the way that? And it wasn't just her. You could hear other people in the theater like responding to it, and I liked it, and I thought it was visually great. But I just never felt it the way other people felt it. Like I have like some of my like guy friends who would never admit to crying during a movie, admit to crying during this one.
I have while watching it alone.
And they were like, dude, they're like, that's like one of the only movies that makes me cry. And I was like, again, am I like broken? Why is this not working? And then like I think I told you before we got on, I was like, I never had watched the movie alone. I usually watched it with someone else that wants to check it out, or it's been with a group of people. Sometimes I won't be the one that will suggest watching it. It will just be like I'm at a friend's house and they throw it on. So there's still people around. And I think this is one I had to like take in by myself, because this was the first time that I actually felt way more emotionally invested in it compared to like previous watches. And I think the last time I watched it was maybe 5 years ago.
Oh wow,
so it had been a while. And I hate to say this too, but for a long time, before Tenet came around, this was like my least favorite of his movies. And I felt bad saying that too. Like I was like almost what's wrong with you? Kind of like smack myself. Like, what are you like? Are you watching the same thing that other people are watching? But this was a much different watch, and I think it's because I actually could just soak in all the emotions like by myself and like take in every moment by myself, not be worried about someone like asking me questions or people talking over it, or like there's like a lot of
interruptions.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know why I didn't feel that theatrically, because it's not like anyone was like talking during the movie. But it was a packed theater when we saw it, because this was a pretty big movie when it came out. Yep. It did really well. But I really did feel in the moment in theaters, I was like, why am I not feeling this? And like my friends got out and they were feeling it, and then they were like, well, did you feel the same way? And I was like, I try to distract myself, like, no, I mean, let me think about it. And of course, like I had one friend that came back to me, he's like, did you not like it? I was like, no, I liked it. I just didn't get me then, but it definitely got me now. Like there were moments during the movie when watching it for this, that I was like, wow, why didn't I feel this before? But I think it was a product of having to watch it alone and not have like anything else influence what I was seeing, or just kind of just be totally invested in what was on screen. And it wasn't just like the acting performances that got me; it was some of the visuals that like got me, where I was like emotionally moved by some of the like. I think I told you before, with like movies that take place in space, like the vastness of space, like freaks me out and scares
terrifying stuff.
But some of the visuals in here, like he made it look beautiful, and it wasn't terrifying. And and that is what I kind of pulled from watching some of the visuals this time around. I was like, oh, this is just a beautiful piece of artwork. And
exactly what it feels like while watching it. Every component of film, I think, really, really comes together in this movie, like where everything's firing on all cylinders, and it really does feel like you are witnessing a masterpiece. That's how I've always felt while I watch this movie. From the acting, the cinematography, Hans Zimmer's score, I think, is my favorite part of this movie. I still like semi-regularly listen to it. Like I listen to movie scores when I'm studying or when I'm like in deep focus, but I kind of want some sort of stimulation. When I don't want to listen to lyrics, I'll play movie scores. And No Time for Caution and Mountains from this movie are go-tos, like incredible pieces of music. Even the story about how Hans Zimmer developed the score for this movie is something that I've really find interesting about this too. But you're right, it is absolutely wicked art, and there's no other way to describe it for me. This movie has everything going to 11, and it's great.
And it's also the attention to detail, man. Like it's like that's what, like, I mean, we talked about like how accurate they say it is. I mean, that is, you can just tell there's so much attention to detail, and that he didn't want to make something that was like phony. Like, hey, this is my interpretation of what this looks like. I want this to look as close as what like the experts say this looks like, and not just my like interpretation of what I think it is. And I didn't know this until we did it for this, like reading up on it, how much respect he got from so many people for how accurate that he tried to at least make it, and how I mean, I thought that was really cool, because some filmmakers I don't think would do that. I think they would just kind of like, here's my spin on this, and you kind of hear like about a lot of scientists who like will watch movies that take place in space, and they're just like, no,
that's not this one's hard to rip apart, because he was lucky to have the consultation of Kip Thorne, who I do not know outside of the context of his work with Nolan on this movie, but from the basics is he's a world-renowned astrophysicist, probably holds a lot of other titles too. I think he's a Nobel Prize winner, and he consulted and worked with Christopher Nolan and Jonathan Nolan on the script for this movie, and really was a tenant in making sure that the physics and everything that is depicted in this movie is, even though if it's never been experienced, is somewhat is grounded in actual laws of physics. So what we're seeing, the scientific principles behind the various things in this movie are grounded in reality, which I think is fantastic. And there's a slight mention, or I guess a shout out to him in Dr. Mann, the character that oh my gosh, why am I blanking? I almost said Matthew McConaughey. Matt Damon plays.
Damon,
he's got one of the robots that's kind of been decommissioned in the corner, and you can see that its name was Kip, Kipp, and that was a little nod. But on the note of that, something that made me think of him, and the praise that Nolan got for keeping it real, is apparently Kip Thorne had to talk Christopher Nolan out of an idea for over a period of 2 weeks about traveling faster than the speed of light, which is impossible. And Nolan really wanted to incorporate that into the script. Where or how, I don't know, but apparently it took a lot of convincing for him to ditch that idea, which I think is kind of hilarious, because everything else is like pretty steadfast in its physics. Hilarious. So I can imagine Nolan being like, but like, I really
we can make this work. I really want to do this.
Like, no, it's not possible. We can't do it.
Like, like you're being pretty realistic with everything else. Like, don't mess
exactly. Don't blow it on that. Yeah.
Like, don't make your movie.
Exactly. And I do think that something like as cool and what sort of possibilities that might open up, like fictionally, I think that's really cool to explore. But I agree that I think that would have kind of taken away from the credibility of this movie, what makes it so magical. So I'm glad that Kip Thorne ultimately won that argument. I did want to find out, I didn't catch it, but how many times do you think you've seen this movie? Like, is it easy for you to count?
I think about 5. It's pretty.
It's a pretty
low.
decent amount.
Pretty low on the Nolan because I've seen some of his other movies more. Like I've seen Insomnia more, which is probably like
really okay. Yes,
it's probably to you. It's probably
once.
like
yeah. I think no.
Why?
5 is see any movie 5 times. That's quite a bit.
But this is the first time that it hit me differently than those other.
And that's awesome. I wish I had 5 years in between my last watch of this movie.
So crazy. I was like, oh, but I mean, I didn't think it'd be as simple as just watching it by myself. Like I was like, or maybe it's just like age. I don't know, like what it was like. Appreciating
10 years is a long time.
Yeah, appreciated it a lot differently than when I first saw it, and yeah, for a lot of my friends, like I said, it's like one of the only movies that makes them cry. It is a few of my friends' favorite Christopher Nolan movies. Like it's not even a contest for them. It's their favorite.
I'd be one of those. It'd be a toss-up between this and The Dark Knight, but I think ultimately it's this.
Yeah, and the reason that some of them go above The Dark Knight, because I've always been like, wait, The Dark Knight's a great movie, and they're very different movies, right?
Yes,
but they are more emotionally invested in the story than they were in The Dark Knight, because at the end of the day, even though like Christopher Nolan dresses up that movie well as a crime thriller, it's still like a comic book movie. I mean, that's what
exactly.
A lot of people, like this one has more of a human experience in it. And that human touch in this is what I think I felt more this time too, watching it. That really, really helped because, I think, I don't know if it was with you or if it was someone else recently on the show, but like sometimes when you have movies like this and they started talking about like scientific mumbo jumbo, and I have to like really pay attention. So it's like, all right, what are they talking about? I always wonder too with the actors too, if they're just like, are they just spouting off lines? Or are they really learning about what they have to talk about? And what I appreciate about this is one, if you pay attention, like the science is pretty easy to follow, but for the people who maybe aren't attached to that, there is a very good and kind of common human story here too that makes the movie, that honestly elevates it above like a lot of movies of its kind too. I was reminded a little bit, I won't say which one is better, but like made me think of Arrival in the sense where there is a human story there that is more than just like the science in that. And I think that's what that movie works really well for me, because sometimes I can't like latch on to the science part of it because like it's not something I entirely like grew up interested in or like really dived into growing up.
Right.
But like I am very like, I'm pretty empathetic to the human condition, and that makes me want to relate to stories. So like, I will attach myself to that sometimes more than the science. And I'm glad that this movie does kind of have both for both audiences, where they're like, hey, I'm really interested in what the science is saying.
It has something to offer everybody,
and almost an equal value too. I mean, I don't think one aspect of the story like overshadows the other. And if one is starting to like take over a bit, it always brings you back to something like a bit more grounded. I'm always impressed when someone can make these big movies like this in scope and always ground them. And this one finds a way to always come back and be
hard to
completely grounded.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's easy. And he's able to do it in a lot of his movies, actually.
Definitely. And this, I think, probably most perfected with Interstellar. I think it's funny that you mentioned Arrival, because as I said, after Caden and I watched this, she wanted to, the next watch, we ended up watching 1917 later that night, but like since then she wanted to watch something like kind of in the same vein as Interstellar. Like the closest thing I could think of in terms of like sci-fi adventure sort of story mixed with like the human side of things was Arrival, and I kind of pitched it, and then we ended up going with Hell or High Water, but I'm going to keep that on the back burner to throw in sometime and see what she thinks about it. But back to what you said, I wanted to touch on a point you mentioned about how they keep the sort of scientific jargon easy to follow. And there was a great contrast to this. When we talked about Event Horizon, I don't think I ended up mentioning this criticism I had of that movie, but I had it written down. But one thing that Interstellar does great is, even though we're dealing with these like super above the average person's head scientific concepts, with like the three main characters that are on the Endurance, like the ship, for the majority of the movie, they're all qualified astronauts, but with different specialties. Right. So we got Cooper, who's the pilot engineer. We've got Brand, who I'm not really sure what her specialty was. and then it's been a week now. I'm kind of forgetting Romilly, who is the like astrophysicist. So
yeah,
they're all super educated, very knowledgeable, competent to handle themselves in space, but they all have their own unique skills, right? And so they do take some time to explain to the other crew members.
She's supposed to be responsible for like doing the planet colonization, right? Like that's
right, exactly.
Like what she ends up doing, and I think also to kind of have the voice of her father there too. I mean, like played by Michael Caine. I think that's one of the other.
She's the mission's overseer, essentially.
Yeah, because he can't be there. I think that has a lot to do with like her position there as well. Yeah.
And so she works great as a stand-in for the audience member to get sort of like exposition as to what some of these concepts are that they're dealing with up in space, but not in a way that really feels like overt exposition. Like it kind of makes sense that not everybody up there is going to specialize in the same or have the same understanding of these vastly different quantum mechanical, theory. So I love that. And so back to Event Horizon, one of my criticisms that I've written down in my notes for that episode is that they toss around scientific jargon and as if the audience just kind of understands it. There's no character in there that works as like exposition. And so I found that kind of just annoying with the dialogue in that movie, and Interstellar rectifies that very well. Yeah. And another great connection to those movies is the wormhole example, like with the pen to the paper. That scene being in both. I think I wouldn't know for sure, but I imagine IMDb anyway credits Romilly's demonstration of that principle of the wormhole and how it connects people through space and time to like Event Horizon doing that same thing, which I thought is kind of a cool bridge between those two movies.
Yeah, I also agree with you about that movie, Event Horizon, spouting off jargon and not really like just assuming that everyone in the audience is like, yeah, we study this. We know what's up.
Complete bullshit. And I would imagine I think it's one of those head scratching ones, like for scientists that watch the movie, like, what does this even mean? This is just
But, I wanted to ask you a question too, because like a lot of with the movie, that's like some of like life can't be sustained here the way when we're kind of starting off. If you were in a position to go off and explore somewhere where a new place where we could sustain life, knowing what you would leave behind, that means to me that was like part of the story that I really latched on to, and I don't know why I did before, but the idea of having to leave your life behind and knowing like how much time you could lose by doing that, but on the other hand, you could find another place where more life could be sustained. Like, what would be your choice? I mean, doing that. I mean, like, so it's an interesting conundrum, I guess.
It is. I think it's hard not being a parent. That's what I think is one of the core aspects of this movie is parenthood and Cooper trying to reconcile leaving his kids and particularly his daughter behind to eventually save them and find a new place for them to live at perhaps the cost of their entire relationship. And so I'm really interested to see this movie if and when I ever become a father, because I think it's going to hit even harder. But like, obviously I can still think about this question as like leaving my current life behind now. If it was up to me to face the choice that Matthew McConaughey's character faces in this movie, it's like, I don't know that I could do it. I think it's like one of those, it's what makes the stakes of this movie so great, that obviously he decides to risk it all, and that's what leads to our movie and the stakes. But I don't know, it's one of those decisions that doesn't come by easily. I don't know that I would be able to. First of all, I don't even know that I would even get in a space shuttle, because that shit is terrifying. But I mean, to go to unknown planets that nobody's ever come back from,
even if it has the beauty of Christopher Nolan space, and like I don't think so. I mean, I will say though, I think her name is Mackenzie Foy, who plays Murph when she's young. She has some really good scenes. I mean, the one where she's basically begging him not to leave, and it's pretty. And like that scene could have been easily like just kind of like manipulative and not really, like, oh, it's trying to tug at your heartstrings a bit. Right. But she was so good in the moment, and Matthew McConaughey is so good at conveying, like trying to kind of like comfort her as a father, but also being like, I have to do this. And her going back and forth telling her, I was wrong about this, like, trying to convince him not to, doing everything that she can to convince him not to leave. I mean, even not being a parent, I was just like, oh, that would just be a hard, gut-wrenching to watch your daughter cry, or someone you love cry, and like begging you not to leave because of what there's so many risks. I mean, there are benefits, but there's also the risks. You might not even come back, or there's a whole lot of stuff that could happen. And I just thought that was handled really well.
A genius part, I think, in terms of the screenplay, is when he, in an attempt to comfort her and kind of take her mind off the fact that he's leaving, when he tries to demonstrate to her that when he comes back, they might be the same age. And how that conveys to her that he has no idea when he's coming back or if he's coming back, how that backfires on him. Oh, what a heartbreaking.
And I love the callback to her. Now she's adult and she's played by Jessica Chastain, and she mentions that and her video call to him, and she's like, and it's the way that Jessica Chastain says it. Like she says it so slow and deliberate. And now I'm the same. Like
it's a twisting knife.
Basically. And honestly, that whole scene. So that was, I don't know why. Like until now, that whole scene moved me in a whole different way than before.
That scene is a tearjerker.
It's just like because I know what he is watching and he's experiencing. And also, I always forget this. I don't know why, but I always forget that Timothée Chalamet's in this. I mean, only because it's just a small.
It was before
part.
He was Timothée Chalamet.
Yeah. But him, it's Matthew McConaughey. I mean, this was after after he won his Oscar for Dallas Buyers Club, right?
The year after, yeah.
So the McConaughey Sons had already happened. So we were we were already reminded. Yeah, we were already reminded that he's a strong, dramatic actor, and it's not easy. I think I don't know what they really had him reacting to. If they had him reacting to actual footage on set, or if they're telling him what he's seeing as an actor, like what he needs to react to. Right. But whatever the case, it feels like he is very much reacting to what we're seing him react to.
It does. Could be camera trickery, but
but just knowing what we know, this is he's seeing this moment of just missing out that his young son, I have a new girlfriend now, and he's missing all these key moments in his life, and then to see the jump, and he's aged, and he's now Casey Affleck, and just Matthew McConaughey, the tears and everything just feel like that was just so real and gut wrenching, and then then the jump again, saying they have to you have to bury the grandfather and all that stuff, all that, that, that concept too is what got me too, is all that time that is lost, there on Earth where they're at, and it doesn't feel like that for them. And I that is something I would never that concept floors me. That concept of time.
Agreed. I remember trying to wrap my head around this while watching it and being like, wait, what? And still I find it such an amazing thing that they worked into this plot is just makes you think, and the fact that is even real is, like you said, mind-blowing.
And I thought that was the best visual way to show that. I'm glad it wasn't cut to back to immediate to Earth and they're grown up and that's when we see it. I'm glad that we got to see it in that moment with that great fucking score in the background, just watching him watch these videos, and it's jarring for us to watch them suddenly age, and then it was just a really good way to represent that. And that was another thing for me too, and I was thinking oh, that's so crazy to have that concept of time, how much you would lose, what that would be such a fuck up in your brain to know that all that time has passed down there, but for you it hasn't even been that.
It's been a few hours.
That blows my mind.
That's terrifying.
But handled so well. I mean, for emotional scenes, probably my favorite one in the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a couple others. I mean, but that one was
this and one other near the end are it's a toss up for me. I do think this is probably the more dynamically acted one, but the implications of when he's reunited with Murph and all that scene in the hospital is impossible to keep it together while I'm watching that. At least solo. Yeah, no, this scene, it's a standout scene, the one we're describing of like the messages over the years. Like that is just a scene that like even by itself is like incredible and a highlight of the movie. And I love the cherry on top of that scene is like obviously he's watching all these video messages from his son over the years and realizing he's like, I've not gotten a single one from my daughter in the 21 years that have passed in the last 3 hours. And the one that he finally does get from her by impeccable timing, screenplay wise, is essentially like she's filled with blame and resentment at him for leaving. And so she's not even able to appreciate the sacrifice that he's making, which is an extra sting on top of everything that he's just lost. And it's such great
like
writing.
The sting that she kind of was giving him when she was young too. Like there was that thing where like, she didn't really want to come and say hi to him or talk to him, like, because she was still like mad and like, that, and he had to kind of like, I mean, again, to know that is what you're doing to her and like how she feels about it, but understanding what you need to do on a greater level because you're working towards something bigger. Again, like decisions to be made, not adult decisions that we have to make by any means, but still like kind of interesting questions to ask yourself while you're watching it. I think that's why it works so well. And Jessica Chastain like gets introduced in the movie fairly late, and she holds her own pretty much. Actually, this is a good example. So when I'm watching this, I was reminded that he is a director that gets a lot of crap for not writing female characters well, are presenting them are presenting them in a way where they are, three-dimensional and have depth. I think that this movie proves that wrong, probably more so than most of his movies. I think Anne Hathaway's character is pretty well written. It might be more than what she brings to it than maybe what's on the page, but I think she has a lot of depth. And I also think in the short amount of time, relatively short, because she is in a good chunk of the movie, after its first half, pretty much. But what Jessica Chastain does as that stage in Murph's life is actually pretty good too. And this is going to be, if I ever have to think of an example to push back on that argument of Christopher Nolan doesn't really write female characters well, I think this will be the example I use. I think this is a case where that's not true. I think they are pretty well rounded.
The character of Murph and her relationship with Matthew McConaughey is some of the best character writing that either of the Nolan brothers I think have ever put to paper. And while he does kind of sparingly write great female characters, this is kind of one that almost makes up for all that because their dynamic is fantastic. And when she kind of realizes what's been going on and puts her resentment aside and kind of understands the sacrifice her dad has made, is such a cathartic moment when you realize that she now kind of gets it and is on his side. It's just can't be replicated.
It's great because it's complicated, but then there's understanding. It starts from a place of like this misunderstanding, and then kind of like both being like on the same page, and that's just good writing. I mean, to have it go from one relationship dynamics to the next, I think that's really
I do find it kind of hilarious how he kind of doesn't give a shit about his son at all.
After
he leaves.
Well, when I watch it, because they both seem pretty self-sufficient. But the relationship that he has with his son, at least in the few scenes that we get together with them, I'm not saying that it feels distant, but it seems like the son is on his own kind of. He can take care of himself. Like it. Yeah, that's the vibe I was getting.
He doesn't really need much more coaching.
Yeah. I think he kind of understands the drill, and that could come off as being kind of cold. But I wonder if other people took it that way, because I could see that being like, he doesn't seem as invested, but I think he just like kind of understood that his son got it,
right? But like,
take care of himself.
Obviously, like he mentions throughout his journey away from Earth, like he's trying to get back to his family. But like there are scenes where like specifically Murphy is referenced as like his connection to home. When he gets back all these years later, like Tom is his son, right?
Yeah.
Never mentioned or addressed by him, I don't think, screenplay wise at all. And I'd never really considered it before now. Obviously I'm aware of like this distinction that like obviously Murphy is like the character that Nolan is more invested in us analyzing. Like that's the core and emotional crux of the movie is Murph and Cooper. But I'm wondering, is it a screenplay oversight or is it just like a sacrifice that he made for us to be more invested in the relationship with Murph? And I'm curious about your take on it.
I'm wondering that too, because like I was wondering if it's because I don't want to say it's like bad writing, but it feels like,
go so far as to say that.
Yeah, I feel like it's because their connection is necessary for where we end up, and once they are the ones that have to have this kind of understanding by a crucial moment in the movie. That maybe that's why the focus is on them.
Yeah.
And it might be that might be a better word is oversighted, but I mean it is interesting because he does have 2 kids.
Yeah,
but it is his, and not to say he doesn't have a connection with his son, but I think they want the audience to be invested in that connection with Murph because of what that connection will lead to and what the benefits are of that. There is an emotional payoff in the end with it.
Yes.
But that could be more of an oversight. It does seem like he did like kind of to his other kid.
Yeah.
Not that but there are already really scenes where he shows like deep affection. But like you said, he does mention like I have to get back to my kids, like all that, like plural. But
yes,
but it is more of a tie to her.
Definitely.
And, I mean, do you think it's a oversight in the writing, or more so that like it's just that they have a deeper understanding connection with each other? Because
I think you're right. It's maybe
it's almost like it's like preordained that they would have that kind of like down the line. I mean, I guess that's what it feels like. Like this is where they were headed anyway, and that's why the connection feels stronger. I kind of going to go with that. I don't want to believe that he just kind of forgot that. Like, oh yeah, that's good. Yeah, the other kid. We should probably.
I'd say if anything, if I were to make a small critique, I would maybe sort of address Tom's fate, because we find out Murph is at least alive long enough for them to reunite, however briefly.
Yeah.
No mention of Tom that I've ever caught. Nothing.
No, there isn't.
We don't necessarily have to see an old Tom or like see a gravestone, but like something maybe just to be like, okay, yeah. Well, and then he has a moment to grieve or find out what had happened to him. But anyway, ultimately it's never bothered me. It's kind of humorous to me, if I'm being honest, that after like the cornfield burning and Jessica Chastain figuring it out.
Yeah.
Like he's gone, and he's at the point where we last see him and Murph are like, he's very upset at Murph the last we see of him, and then they kind of hug it out, or Murph kind of hugs him after she realizes, I can't remember exactly, she figures out the bookshelf and stuff, and the significance, and then is like so overwhelmed with, I don't know, enlightenment, I guess you could say, that she hugs her brother, and he's like wanting to kill her, and then that's the last we see of him. This is kind of funny.
That is true.
Yeah,
I'm glad you said that. You worded that a good way too. That she's filled with all this enlightenment, because like before that it was low key resentment, and like all this like anger, and then now she's kind of like
this is why he left. It was
like had this epiphany, and like
epiphany. There you go.
Yeah, and that I know
better way to put it.
It's interesting that is the last time you see him. Yeah, that's true.
Just wanted to bring back something I mentioned earlier. So anyway, according to IMDb, Interstellar is in the top 20 top rated movies as per IMDb in the number 19 slot, which is,
I think most of his movies are, except maybe Insomnia.
Except and
maybe Tenet.
Probably.
Or is Tenet? I don't think Tenet's in there.
Actually, I don't think Tenet would be, because that one was really, really mixed. Oddly enough, usually it's with Nolan and Tarantino. When I watch one of their movies, I always have an impulse to watch another one. And Tenet is the one that's jumping out at me right now since I've watched Interstellar. I really want to see that again.
Yeah, I was told to rewatch that. My buddy Nick that works at the restaurant, I was saying like that's my least favorite one. And he's like, when's the last time you watched it? And literally it was around the time it like came out.
For you?
He was like, oh yeah. And he was like, well, watch it again. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I know.
That turns 5 in August, I think.
Yeah, so that'd be a good time to read. I know it doesn't feel that long ago. That also reminds me of such a dark time movie-wise, because it was like, during the pandemic. And I do respect that he wanted to release that the way he wanted to. And kind of blessing in disguise. He ended up with Universal, which might be like a better home for him. I know he's with Warner Brothers forever, but they weren't willing to respect what he wanted to do with Tenet, and so that's what I need to rewatch. I'm always saying justice for Insomnia. I know it's not like big like his other movies,
Right.
But I like it. I like thrillers though stuff. So like that's why I enjoy
Exactly. And his smaller scale movies are also
low key never seen the original version of that movie either. So I don't even know how it compares to like the original version of Insomnia. Like it's a remake.
And right. Like that would actually be a great double take
comparison
sometime. Yeah. I forgot about that. And Stellan Skarsgård is in it too, the original. I think it's like Swedish or Danish or whatever it is.
It'd be funny if December kind of starts this whole like comparing remakes to the originals. That might be
I think that's a great
Black
series waiting to happen.
I think Black Christmas might be us testing that out.
If we spent the time to dig up all the examples of that, I'm sure we'd be surprised at how many we could do. I think Wreck and Quarantine would be great, but that could be a conversation.
Yeah, for
that
sure.
Would be really cool. I was going somewhere with something for a sec. Tenet. Yeah, let's bookmark that. That would be a great time to revisit that. Oh, and on the note of that, I was just thinking earlier while I was looking at my 4K, I was like, oh, this is my I only have a handful of 4Ks. I'm like, oh, this is my second Nolan 4K because I don't have any other 4Ks like by the same director. But I'm just realizing that Tenet was actually the first 4K Ultra HD movie I ever got. I got it as soon as it was released physically after seeing it in theaters in the pandemic because it was such a slump for movies, and we had this treat in a Nolan release, and I was out one day, one of those rare times, like I was out at the mall or something, and I didn't even really know what 4K was and stuff. I got the idea that it was obviously a higher quality home media experience and that it had all these extra features and stuff, but I was like, yep, I'm going to take that for $40 or whatever it was when it first released. This is actually my third Nolan 4K, but
nice.
Would love to watch that again because I got the itch.
Cool. Yeah, I haven't. Yeah, and I probably will think of it differently. It'll be one of those where like, maybe it's just the timing of when I watched it.
Yeah, I'm a Tenet sympathizer, although I find it every time I'm done watching it, I'm like, I feel like I kind of have a grasp, but I've never really gotten to that moment of like fully understanding what's going on. But each watch
it's just
helps.
that sound design. You know what?
The sound design's bad. That's tough.
So it must just be that. So when I was watching Interstellar, I didn't feel that. I mean, it must just be that movie. Or I mean, I know sometimes the effects and music sound loud, but when I was watching Interstellar, I didn't really get that vibe of like I had to like turn the movie down.
It's amazing
to hear dialogue. I think it balanced really well.
Dunkirk is also wonderfully mixed. Like the sound design is fantastic in Dunkirk and Interstellar. I don't know what the issue was with Tenet, but it's noticeably different.
That fucking shakes the room for no reason. I was like, I'm just trying to hear someone talk, and now this is loud, like bomb out of nowhere. There are a ton of visually stunning scenes in Interstellar, but do you have one that like really stands out to you?
Like you're right. Several, and you know what's great about this movie is it gives so much amazing cover art because of just the shots from this movie. Oh, and it's a shame I'm not filming at home because the one disc plate I have is actually from Interstellar. I'll feature it sometime. I'm sure I'll have it posted up behind me at some point when I get like a new setup for recording, but I do have a disc plate of it, which is beautiful. For me, what takes the cake, I think, is just the shots of Gargantua, the black hole.
Oh, yeah.
That thing is just incredibly intimidating to look at, even though you're aware this is like nothing that can never going to impact my life, never going to see this thing. But just knowing, or rather not knowing exactly what a black hole is, but what it could do, just seeing that so accurately on the screen is, to me, it always gives me the chills, and it just looks so just like foreign and scary to me. So, and it just looks incredible. Like I said, comparing it to a real life photo of a black hole is incredible that they were able to depict it before one was ever seen. I don't know how that was ever done, but that and all the space scenes essentially really are incredible to me. I like the wormhole traveling sequence.
That was so. I mean, that I kind of forgot I was watching a movie for a second.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what's really good about most, like actually all the visuals in the movie. You feel like you're not watching a film. At a certain point, you feel like you're kind of like transported there a bit. Like watching this in like a dark room, because all you can really see is the visuals, like nothing else around you. Like you really felt like you are there, and like none of it feels like you're looking at a special effect. And that's another great thing that he does. I know what scene, like it's not maybe not the most visually striking scene, but when I was watching it, and it's the whole tidal wave sequence, and I was just like, hey, this doesn't look like it doesn't look like a giant wall of CGI water. Or like that was like my first train of thought, and then it's just it looks so foreboding as it's slowly, and I love it's like a gradual thing. Like they're kind of like your eyes are adjusting to it as their eyes are adjusting to it, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it really doesn't look like a special effect at all. It looks so genuinely real, and then the score and that scene is just amazing. I think I felt more in that scene just because the music was so good.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know, you're just like hurry up, like get like you're with him, like get back here, hurry up and get back here.
Yeah.
And and unfortunately our poor Wes Bentley.
I know.
Yeah.
It's funny because
always forget about him too.
I know. I just don't ever associate him with this movie for some reason, but it's funny. Like I had seen Wes Bentley performances before this movie, but just like I said, wasn't really keeping track of that sort of thing before. And then coming back after watching like American Beauty and be like, holy shit, that's Wes Bentley in this movie. What the hell?
Yeah.
And anyway, he's incredible. But yeah, just to your point about like the effects of the wave sequence in that movie, even when like the wave crashes and like they ride up it in their shuttle and crash on the other side, like it looks completely legit. I have no idea. That guy is literally magic.
They're separating like special effects from like what could be practical. I mean, like, I don't know. I that whole scene. I mean, like, if any movie can make me feel like I'm there, like I feel like I'm in peril with him or in awe with him or whatever it is. Like,
and the intensity of that scene is,
and it's just like I said, like what got me about that scene was like your eyes are just adjusting to it. Like theirs are, like it does look like when they say it looks like basically like what the track is called. Like it does look like a mountain at first, and then like it just gets closer and closer, and then bigger and bigger, and it's like hurry up and get out of there. Like really well done. Like it's just
amazing.
It's so very good. There are, I mean, like you said too, like we were mentioning, like you always forget certain people are in it. I mean, like you have your leads like Matthew McConaughey and Hathaway. You have Jessica Chastain, Michael Caine, but then you have like people like John Lithgow in it as well. We talked about Casey Affleck. Topher Grace is randomly in this too and I guess the other big name is I guess Matt Damon, which is
comes out of nowhere.
Which I guess I can't remember at the time in the marketing. Like I don't know if they revealed him in the marketing.
I think they pulled like a Kevin Spacey in Seven.
Yeah, because like I don't. Or I remember I remember feeling surprised when he popped up when we saw it in theaters. I don't believe they gave it away in like at least.
He's not one of the big four on the marketing of the DVD anyway.
I don't think they gave it away in trailers and stuff. But like that was a good like. I remember that being like a big surprise because he's such a big name and like even 10 years ago.
Even I recognized how surprising that was when I saw it in theaters. I was like, oh, what the hell? I didn't expect, because obviously I knew Matt Damon at 16. But I was like, I did not expect him to pop out of here.
That's someone that's usually number one on the call sheet. So I was like, why? Like, so I mean, and then that brings in a whole nother like nice little element too into the movie of I don't know what ends up becoming like even more conflict a bit and drama as well. I know they utilize him really well, and I just remember being surprised. I mean, you can pull off that kind of trick of like holding that a secret, because I feel like it was. I don't remember it being in the marketing at all. I think that's a really good thing to do, and not just a throwaway character either. Not like some like cheap, real like cheap little cameo. Really significant role. And I thought that was handled really, really well.
Yeah, he literally is almost responsible for the human race was in his hands at one point, and he almost blew it, which is pretty crazy. But his role, and like I love his introduction when he first wakes up from that. It's not exactly cryo sleep, but whatever sort of mechanism that keeps him alive and stasis for so long. When he comes out of that and like sees another face and like instantly breaks down crying. So you get
because he's been isolated for so long, and like
you get a sense of what he's been through and why he wants so desperately to get out of there, and why he it's a completely rational human like reasoning that he couldn't.
It makes you understand. Yeah, makes you understand his motivations, even though
even as cowardly and like evil. I guess. No, I wouldn't even say he's evil. Like he makes some really bad choices afterwards, but like you can totally sympathize with why he activated that beacon, even though his planet was uninhabitable. Like who could go through that and not do that? So He's a really interesting, like, villain, if you will. I don't even know if I really
I don't even know if I want to call him that. I mean, I guess he does.
Maybe because he abandons
sabotage,
them.
abandons them,
and that makes him a villain. But before that,
they are our protagonists, I guess. But it's just like you do have an understanding of why he does it, and like in like I wouldn't label him a villain. Like he is used as a kind of another vessel of conflict at that point in the movie.
A vessel of conflict. That's a great way of putting it.
But at least his motivations make sense. Like you totally get it. And it's another one of those examples of like, what would you do in that kind of like? It's the same thing with the whole Matthew McConaughey question of like, do you leave or do you stay? And then for him, like, hey, like I've had this experience, and this is why I'm, these are things I've seen. These are things I've kind of been through. This is how isolated I've been. There's like a whole lot of like that makes sense as to why. I mean, I know I've read, different pieces written up about the movie that label him as the villain of the movie. Like, but I don't see that. Like,
not your typical one, anyway. And it's his actions that lead us to what I think is the cream of the crop as far as scenes in this movie, even just in general. The No Time for Caution scene, the docking scene, I guess, as it's known as, which when he tries to dock their shuttle to the Endurance, and obviously the technology's changed, I imagine, since he had last piloted a spacecraft, and the airlock decontaminates and blows it up, and then we get Matthew McConaughey having to dock manually, and the score in that scene, like that, that was another scene before the bookcase scene, for those that know, but where I was like gripped to my seat with anticipation and the intensity of, and just knowing what the stakes are. If they don't dock here, it's game over. And oh my God, it's incredible. It's one of my favorite sequences, I think, just in cinema in general. I've watched that scene and listened to that soundtrack more times than probably anything I've ever watched. Like, I still love it. And it's a scene I wait for when I'm watching this movie. I can't wait to get there. Oh, I remembered I had a thought just leaving my head there. But I was talking earlier at the beginning of the episode that I had like an interesting difficulty watching this movie again this time, because I had normally watched this movie on DVD. I got the DVD like really soon after it came out back in 2015. And then this watch was going to be my first time watching it since I got a Blu-ray. And I got the Blu-ray used from some movie store, and it skipped at a couple times, which really bugged me because I was showing my girlfriend for the first time, and I had a couple times where I had to like kind of rewind, and then it was still skipping at this moment, but it wasn't
crazy, dude.
It drove me nuts, but it wasn't significant, so I kind of dealt with it, and for the most part, it didn't really reoccur. But of course, during the docking scene, it decides to short out, and I was like, okay, I'm not dealing with this. Like, I ended up throwing it on Netflix. I was like, I'm so pissed off right now. So essentially now I don't have a working copy of Interstellar, and that did not sit right with me. So a few days later, I'm going through Walmart, and this was just kismet. I was like, okay, great. This is the best.
That was the universe.
Possible.
That was No wonder you found it at Walmart. That was just the universe just putting it there.
It was literally now it's the best copy of the movie that I could own. So I feel
like
it's still in the plastic wrap.
Yeah, they're like, you went through enough. Here's a real copy of the movie.
Exactly.
That won't fucking skip.
You know what I mean? Like, even though it's a pretty minor infraction, but like when your disc is so much as skips and causes you to pause and like kind of break that tension, it kind of disturbs the process of watching the movie. You know what I mean? Like, maybe not to everybody. Does. It pisses me off so bad. So
it does. So I had a 4K player before I got this Sony one, and I'm noticing that if I'm watching a movie that's like an hour and a half, like hour 45, it works fine. Beyond that, if it was hitting 2 hours, it would start to skip and stop.
Oh man!
And I'm like, and at first I thought it was just like a certain disc, but then I was like, no, it's happening with multiple discs, but discs that are a certain amount of time. So then I go online and find out that model for movies that were like hour 50 or longer, they were having issues with like the playback on it. So that's why I ended up getting my new 4K player because of that. But yeah, it's frustrating especially when you're trying to watch movies with a friend or anyone. Like, you're not trying to mess up the experience, and that could definitely fuck it up. So
yes,
especially a movie like that would
exactly. I'm so invested in this. Yeah. No bueno.
Really frustrating. The whole bookcase thing too. I remember when I saw it in theaters being visually like in awe of it because it is a really visual, like it's a really strong sequence, right? And but then again, because I wasn't like for some reason not fully emotionally invested in it. That's stupid,
right?
But I was this time. Like I was like oh, like I just I don't know. Again, watch the whole movie. I felt so differently, like on my own this time than I had in like times before. And like it's such a like I mean there are a lot of visually strong moments. I mean I think the presentation of all that is just really just cool, and the idea of it is so cool. And that kind of like that's how they're like communicating at that point, and it's just so like that's what makes it so emotionally resonant as well too. And then there's the whole callback to when she was younger and the whole like ghost thing, and I was like, oh yeah, that's it. Just so
couldn't even
so
comprehend
cool.
that at that point. Like this is such amazing. At that point, obviously, I don't really know at this point like how grounded in reality that is. Like it's hard to even conceptualize like what we think of time as a physical construct, but I remember my brain like trying to wrap my head around that while watching that scene unfold for the first time, being like, this is so incredible. Like I don't even understand how a movie can like, be this smart. And like then I had this absolutely adoration for Christopher Nolan after that. But you're right, that's one of those scenes that it definitely hooks you in there once you realize sort of like the implications behind events that happened so much earlier in the movie that really were so ominous. And I remember I was looking out of the corner of my eye at Caine while we're watching this, and she's pretty smart. And I was really hoping she wasn't going to figure it out or make any connection until we got our answers from the movie. And from what I gather, she was taken aback by it. And I was like, oh, it's so great to like have perfect. That realization. That's I remember that.
It is really cool,
so
and honestly, for anyone watching movies, like I mean, for us to tell you how to watch them, like if a movie's really smart, like a moment like that early in the movie will not just be a throwaway piece of dialogue, or like it will like they will call back to that, and I just remember when it did, I was like, oh, I thought that was just so cool. But you're right, your mind is already wrapping around so much that by the time they're like, oh wow, like that's what was going on too, and like and then there's the whole notion of like, does it make sense? Is it kind of just like a cheap like screenwriting thing to like kind of like emotionally pull us back to like a moment when she was younger and like all this other all that all those things? But even if it's a cheap screenwriting trick, it works. Even if it makes sense in his sense of time and space, it works. So I don't really care why it's there. It is a really nice moment and it's a nice callback. And again, like those kind of moments you should pay attention to when you're watching movies, because like usually like in movies like this, that kind of dialogue exchange won't like that's not just like random like character growth, like, oh, we're just saying this in the moment just because that's how our characters are acting. That's going to make sense later. And when you have I was like, oh,
when you got a screenwriter as talented as the Nolans, like him and his brother, very rarely is there going to be throwaway dialogue that's not important, anything really in the movie that doesn't have some sort of payoff or significance. And that's very apparent in this movie too.
And one of my girlfriends said, who like loves this movie too, she said it's one of the better examples of a movie that kind of shows in a real way the sometimes complicated relationship between a father and a daughter. And definitely. And that's why that movie moves her a lot, because I guess she had a very complicated one with hers, and they kind of found common ground, not like this, they definitely not in the way that this movie does, but they found common ground in a way that was like similar, where there's certain things that she resented him for, and then like things that she understood later when she became an adult, because that's kind of what happens. Like when you become an adult, you gain knowledge, and everything isn't as like you saw it when you were younger. Like you had a kind of narrow-minded view when you're a kid, and once you grow up, you start to see things from a grown-up's perspective, and maybe theirs too, like kind of think about how they were thinking at the time. So she was like, I thought it was really cool that this sci-fi movie was also able to kind of really show realistically what that relationship was like. And it kind of took someone like her saying that, because I thought that was cool, because I mean I can't really identify with it. We can I guess we can on another level, but like it's different, like for a girl to talk about that. So I thought for someone to say that is really well written and really well developed and well handled, just like the stages of it. I mean, I think that's why the movie pays off so well, is because like they make you earn it, that you earn that
yes, they do.
You earn that reconnection with them, and that's what I ended up liking about it this time around, because I felt it. I felt like I felt it for the first time, and it was just so weird.
I'm so glad for you, because it's like so worth having that full emotional investment in, and it makes the movie that much more enjoyable when you're, beyond just being impressed and in admiration for what you're watching, but when you have that emotional connection, that's just kind of hard to beat when you're watching something. So I love that you were totally into it.
Yeah. And because I used to say, man, I was like, what is wrong? Why am I not feeling this the way other people are? Like,
it's not always going to happen on the first time, and I've had movies too where I kind of appreciated them more on rewatches, but this was definitely one of those exceptions where it's like I loved it since I love it every time. It doesn't age for me. It doesn't get what I worry about. Why I put some distance between watches is because I don't want to wear myself out from this movie, and I will probably spend some more time before going back to this. But my mom is the next one up that I will watch this with, because she has always been like, I gotta clearly watch this again, because I'm always talking about this movie. I mention it all the time as being one of my favorites, and she's just really resistant to science fiction because she doesn't like all that stuff, and I feel like she thinks it's like Star Wars kind of science fiction.
Yeah, like not cerebral, like more like
right,
fire photon lasers, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's like, okay, well, this is a little bit different. I get though, like the hesitation. If you're not into Star Wars, I get why you would like kind of lump sci-fi in there, but like it's a huge genre. So anyway, maybe she will, if I have some things to contribute to the watch with her, maybe she will look at it differently, or maybe time will have passed and she will look at it
open to doing it with you. I mean, I can't see her like watching it by herself. I mean, if she's that resistant to it, she might be like,
likely not. Yeah,
she might tap out. But like if you're there watching with her, I mean, that might help.
I think so too. We watch movies together every once in a while, and it's usually a special moment. So this will be one that I'd like to see with her.
I did want to ask you, because this movie was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, but they were technical ones.
Yes,
it won for best visual effects.
Right, very deservedly.
Do you think it did? Well, I mean, like this one. I mean, there have been other Nolan movies. Like, I mean, would you rank this above Inception? Like for you personally, because that was
absolutely yeah. So I love Inception, but I've seen it too many times now.
Right,
I need a break.
So,
and
are you surprised that this didn't get like a Best Picture nomination or any love for some of the acting or anything like that?
At the time, no. Like I think I was watching the Oscars at this time, but I wouldn't really have like had much of an opinion back then about what I thought should have been nominated and stuff. Like I probably would have thought this would be it, because like it was my personal favorite movie, and like how could it not get the Best Picture nom? But I need to look at what it was up against. I know Birdman won for this year.
That's a good movie, though.
Which is like fantastic. Great.
I do love Birdman.
Pick.
Yeah, that was the year of American Sniper, Boyhood, The Grand Budapest Hotel, The Imitation, the Imitation Game, Selma, The Theory of Everything. I probably would have swapped that up, and Whiplash. And Whiplash is also.
Oh right, good. Yeah, I forget Whiplash was nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah, you know what? I was going to say I could easily swap out The Theory of Everything and throw this in there.
Oh, I'm looking at directing. Yeah. Like 2014 is definitely one of those really, really strong years. But like in hindsight, I totally think this movie should be in there. But a lot of those Best Picture nominees are fantastic. Yeah. I have not seen Selma, and I've not seen The Theory of Everything, and I've actually not seen Boyhood. I've had that picked out for a long time.
Oh yeah, that was on our anniversary list for a minute.
Oh yeah, shit.
Yeah.
But everything else that I have seen from those nominees is absolutely deserving. But yeah, I love that it won something. It's even on this 4K version. It says Academy Award winner visual effects. Yeah. I love that it has that cred, and it's totally deserving. And another tie in 2001, they both share that distinction of winning visual effects at the Oscars, which is pretty cool.
Yeah,
and I think that was the only one that each movie won. Which is also just.
I think I tricked myself into thinking this was nominated for Best Picture. I knew it wasn't, but then I saw 5 Academy Award nominations. I was like, oh, of those 5, but I was thinking
it has to be right.
Yeah, one of them.
Was it not nominated for directing? You said they were all technical.
No, they were all technical.
That's insane. Like, how did Hans Zimmer's score not win?
Yeah, and it's a great score.
Grand Budapest Hotel did though. Oh my God, that nominee Alexandre Desplat. I'm probably butchering that. I think he sounds French. He also did the Imitation Game score, and he was nominated for both, and he won for Grand Budapest Hotel. That's pretty impressive.
Oh, he had a good year. Look at him.
Yeah, but Interstellar, like that to me that's like the bigger sin, I think. Like Hans Zimmer's score, I think will go down in history for this movie. Anyway, it's still incredible. I still see it referenced all the time.
Yeah. And this movie was highly financially successful as well. Made $681 million worldwide at the time of its release on a $165 million budget. It has been re-released a few times since then and has upped that total to $730 million in subsequent re-releases. I'm still surprised by the review stuff. 73% seems low for this.
It does.
And it got a B+ cinema score from opening day audiences. The Los Angeles Times said that most film critics largely agree that Interstellar is an entertaining, emotional, and thought-provoking sci-fi saga, even if it can also be clunky and sentimental at times. That's like the most the complaints I've read in other reviews that were similar. That
clunky,
it's like clunky and sentimental, and that they believe that like it kind of like its visual, like the visuals are stronger than like the story itself, and I don't agree with that, but
I don't agree with that, but they are both really strong.
Yeah. And Quentin Tarantino loved the movie too.
Nice. Yeah. How could he not, right?
He said it's been a while since somebody has come out with such a big vision of things, even the elements, the fact that dust is everywhere and they're living in this dust bowl that is just completely enveloping this area of the world. That's almost something you would expect from Malick or someone else, not a science fiction adventure movie like this. He actually really loves Interstellar. It's always interesting in the movies that he gravitates to and like really loves. But yeah, and then I think from what I've seen, like the reviews are not just, they weren't like ripping it apart. It's just like they wish that the story itself was as strong as the visuals. But I mean, what can you do? You can't please.
What can you say? I mean, the movie's like, to me, it's perfect. It's one of those movies. I'll save my score to the end. I did have two questions I wanted to run by you.
Sure.
Wrap things up. So the way this movie ends, I remember while watching it, and I've kind of changed my position over the years, but the first several times I've seen this, I was under the impression that it was setting up a sequel. Like we see some of the last things we see are Matthew McConaughey sneaking out of whatever base or location that he's held in, steals a shuttle, and it's implied that he's going to go rescue Brand, who's stuck on Wolf Edmund's planet and starting a new colony by herself.
Yeah.
And I always thought, are we going to get a sequel to that? Do you think this is a movie that needs a sequel? And if it did, would it be something that you think would carry on the legacy of the movie, or do you think it could jeopardize what is like a really, really well-made movie?
Of his, just because I trust him and his brother as writers, of his like original movies, I would be down to see a follow-up to this and kind of see where that was headed, like maybe see what she ended up doing, where she colonized somewhere else. I would love to see that, because I think that, like, one, I don't think he would do it unless it was a good idea. So if it did come about, I would be down for it. I kind of think that he's so specific about what he wants to do that I don't think he would do anything that would tarnish the legacy of his movies. I mean, the things that he's made sequels to, right, is kind of like by necessity, which is like the Dark Knight trilogy. That was kind of like, that's a little different. But of his original stories, it would be the one I would want to see more of, and I would be intrigued by it, and I would trust him and his brother to write something that would be necessary. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, so like I said, I've changed my position. Like, I don't think it needs a sequel. I think it's implied. So it's funny because Caine also agrees, like, well, we need to see what happens. Like, clearly, like, she wanted a resolution, I think, between him and Brand. Yeah. And I get that. That's how I felt when I first saw it. But now I'm like, a sequel would be great. But I feel like ultimately the challenge of the movie was addressed and like met, like, and saved. Humanity's, been relocated, saved. And yes, I think the movie's just implying that he's going to rescue Brand, and that's like an adventure that we're just not meant to really see, and would probably go off relatively smoothly if we were going to think about it. Maybe not though. Like, so I do worry that it would cheapen the ending of the first one, and it might just be one of those movies that perfectly exists and doesn't ever get touched or remade, and there's no need to. And I think I like it better that way. I didn't think I'd ever find myself saying that because I'd want more of this universe, but I don't think it needs it really. I think it exists great as a solo adventure. Yeah. The other question I wanted to pose to you is this Christopher Nolan's best movie in your opinion?
Not for me personally, but I well, how are we defining what makes it his best movie?
Well, what do you think? You articulate. What do you think?
I'm trying to think of all the movies. Perhaps for like pure, I'm trying to think of everything that he's done. For pure emotional resonance, it probably is his best movie. Like as far as like speaking to the human condition and what it kind of speaks to about just as a human story, I think it probably is his best, most well-rounded movie as far as that is concerned. So if I'm looking at it from that way, I mean, do I think it's his most entertaining? Probably not, or anything like that. But
really,
as a film, as far as the writing is concerned, what it evokes for the audience, it might be his. I think it might be his best movie.
I think Oppenheimer really came close in that respect, which is great.
That is a really great movie. Actually, I almost said good. It's a great movie, but I don't know if I like feel like the. I've watched it a couple of times, but like, I don't know if I get the same like kind of human connection that this gives me.
Maybe not human connection. Maybe like stakes for humanity. I guess is like where these two movies have big similarities. Where like everything's at stake here. Yeah, but you're right. Not like there's no like human connection in Oppenheimer that there is in here. I think that really differentiates the two. And like Interstellar, I don't even know if he could release a movie that would make me like it more than this one.
Yeah,
but
I think because we brought it up earlier, like most people would I think almost reflex say it's The Dark Knight's his best movie,
right?
And I don't. That's why I think it's kind of you have to maybe differentiate like what the standards are. I guess. I mean, or you don't have to. It's your prerogative if that's
exactly like a lot of his movies are very different and hard to rank them against.
And you're gonna meet a fan that likes. You're gonna meet a person that thinks Memento is his best movie. You're gonna meet someone that thinks The Dark Knight is, or but I don't really think he's connected as much on a human level than he did here. Like I think something about this like meant something to him, maybe a bit more. And you kind of feel that in the writing and the execution. So that's like on that level, I think it is his best film for those reasons.
Right on.
And I mean, I'm sure this is his best movie.
Yeah, like I think that's always gonna be my default answer. Like I would
like it'd be hard for me to rank it. It'd be like if I were to do a ranking right now, it'd be hard for me to place it because I'd be like, oh well, this made me feel things, but what would I rather watch more? Like there's like the whole like
I would flip flop I think between this and The Dark Knight. I think they're both equally entertaining, but like I don't know. Sometimes you might just be I have an appetite for one more than the other, and I'm big on Oppenheimer with it being like his most recent and all that. But I think it'd be interesting to compare over time. But I'm really excited to see what he does next. Although I'm fine if it's not Interstellar 2. I don't really think he'll ever really go for something like that. But the cast of his next movie has been ramping up quite a bit, which is great. Is it still set to be like a 1920s?
No,
vampire
so
horror?
they're saying that was all like not true. Like they don't know. They think that it's not true, and that any like log line that we've talked about already is not true. Remember, I think we brought this up briefly. Where at first you were like the cast seems really like on the younger kind of side for stuff. Like you're like Tom Holland and you're like then Zendaya and you're like I don't know. I
thought that was
the
weird.
Whole idea. The idea of like them being in the movie together. But it's funny because like a lot of these people have worked like of course Anne Hathaway's worked with them a few times already. Robert Pattinson's in it. He's already worked with him. But then
Matt Damon.
Zendaya's shooting a movie with Robert Pattinson right now, A24 movie, and they're in this together now.
Right.
And then they just cast Charlize Theron and Lupita Nyong'o is so that's like
Charlize Theron. I did not see that.
Yeah, so like it's a pretty interesting I just wish I knew what he was doing. Like
me too. We will find out.
What if this was your Interstellar?
Oh boy!
If they cast Matthew McConaughey, you're gonna be like, oh,
that could be something. I would love to see him go into horror. Don't know what that would look like.
He likes horror movies too. Like he loves it. He talks about it.
I really hope it's something he's not tackled. Yeah, true. But it is something we haven't really seen him even really come close to tackling. Maybe some aspects of Oppenheimer, but not in your traditional horror movie sense. So I think it'd be really cool to see that. But I'm really intrigued by the cast. Intrigued might not be the right word. Like I am intrigued, but I am also like I don't ever want to use the word skeptical around Christopher Nolan's movies, but I don't see the vision yet in where he's going.
Well, they're all talented. I mean, that's like the interesting thing. I think you're more worried about like the collection of them more than like the individually talented. There's like it's a weird hodgepodge of people.
It is
in the movie.
Exactly, and I just don't know where all these people are gonna fit. But what I love about Nolan's movies is he casts a lot of like B-list actors in really small roles, and I think that's great. Like a lot of familiar faces in his movies that you recognize from other projects and smaller roles that aren't all necessarily competing for screen time because they're not all big A-listers. That is kind of the cast he's assembling here, and I'm like, what? But you know what? He's used big actors in small roles before, and I'm sure.
Yeah. And I don't know if they're lying, but a lot of these people so far who have talked, what they could talk about was that they're giving the impression that like they basically got the call and they just said yes. Like they didn't really. I can't imagine that he didn't pitch them on something, but they insinuated like they were like, hey, all right, will you be available to do this? And they were just like, yeah, I'll do it without even reading anything.
I would blindly say yes to Chris Nolan.
I think I would blindly say yes too. I mean, I would too. I mean, and especially, I mean. I think the younger people in that cast are like trying to collect almost like Pokemon, basically, like working with like
directors,
working with great directors. Like, I don't know if they're like consciously doing it, but like, I mean, it's not smart. It's very smart. If you're someone, if you're a Tom Holland or a Zendaya or even a Robert Pattinson, like you want to work with like top notch talent. I kind of feel like at this point, if people like that core young group digress and work with lesser directors, that it won't benefit them at this point. Like, how do you go from working with Nolan to even to move to like some random, unless the random person has a really good idea and like has a great vision, but like it'd be hard to like, you know, for them to like do some like stupid like rom-com directed by some random like director now. Like, how do you
look at even like McConaughey's career? Like in 2014, he had Interstellar, fresh off his Oscar win, and he had True Detective same year. That was like the peak of his career. He had a pretty big slump after working with Nolan.
Yeah, did he really? Well,
his 2010s, his latter half 2010s were not great.
I think I'm just kind of because I was so focused on how awful his pre-Dallas Buyers Club. Not all of it, but like
not all of it, but it was, you know, Dallas Buyers Club kind of put him back on the map. But
you're kind of right.
He's got some good performances in not spectacular movies. He's got objectively bad movies. He did some voice work, which is, you know, that I've never seen. Like, kind of hard to judge that. But like, what's he got? 2015. I know he has the.
So he did a Gus Van Sant movie called The Sea of Trees. I had never seen it. He did Free State of Jones. He did Gold.
Free State of Jones.
He did a voice in Kubo and the Two Strings. I haven't seen that either. And Sing. He did The Dark Tower, which didn't do well at all.
Right. Yeah.
He started in Serenity with Anne Hathaway. That was garbage.
Garbage.
That
my
was
dad
so bad.
Watched that last year. I kind of joined him for half of it. I was like, "This is
misled by trailers." Have you ever saw those trailers? They were so misleading.
Back in the day, I don't remember what they were like now.
And Harmony Korine's The Beach Bum. Oh, he's in the, you know what? You're right. I didn't realize that his.
Yeah. So I think you're totally right about.
He did the Gentleman. That was pretty good.
Gentleman, yeah, that was 2019.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a pretty significant gap there of like nothing really huge.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't realize it was that
bad. And some stinkers. Yeah. But so I think that's why I think you're totally right about, what happens when these younger people work with somebody of this talent and then kind of divert back to some lower scale stuff.
You accept nothing less. I think this new generation of actors who are like in their age group, it seems like they are smarter than some of the like younger people that sprung up before them, where they aren't just accepting stuff that like, oh, this will do well at the box office, or this is like, they're not resting on the fact that like, oh, I'm good looking or I'm pretty. Like it seems like they want to be taken very seriously, and they're also taking more stake in their own stuff. They're producing their things, and like they're just a lot smarter than like the generation that came before them. So like
I think they're adapting to newer movie going trends, right? It's harder to make a name for yourself as an A-lister, and there's all this talk about the movie star not existing anymore, the death of the movie star. And so the big six right now, or however many there are, the newer younger talent, they gotta adapt to that. I think for the most part they're doing pretty good, because we all know Austin Butler, Sydney Sweeney, Timothy Chalamet, Zendaya, like that group.
Florence Pugh is in that
Florence
group
Pugh
too.
is up there, absolutely.
I guess Anya Taylor-Joy is probably in there too. Definitely. I guess the big thing is like only so few of them can carry a movie like box office wise. I think Timothy Chalamet is proving that now.
Yes.
And I think Zendaya is probably in that group too. It's hard if Tom Holland, unless he's in a Spider-Man movie or
I'm not sold. Honestly,
I think he's
sold on
I think he still
needs to,
he needs to still prove himself. I think he's talented though.
For sure. But I think he needs support. But
even Florence Pugh can't carry a movie on her own, really, like box office wise. I mean, she's more of a actress than like a name above the title kind of person.
True.
And Anya Taylor-Joy, I think she had her. I mean, she kind of proved that with Furiosa. Like, she's not really like
very much so.
We are judging
the menu too.
Oh, I love that movie, dude.
Speaking of Chalamet, though, has his Bob Dylan biopic come out? Because I don't remember.
We got early screen. It comes out on Christmas Day, but early screenings have started.
Okay.
The reviews so far are pretty good.
Come and go. Reviews are
good. The reviews so far are pretty good.
Good.
The initial ones were really good. Now there are a couple that are coming out that's saying that it's an okay movie and he's good in it.
Okay.
Apparently he got real method while making it though. Like his name was Bob Dylan on like the call sheet. Like he pretty much acted like him the entire time. But I think that's just because he needed to. Yeah.
Yeah. I know what you think about method acting. I think it's kind of cool. I haven't heard that about him before. So,
that would be annoying because I'd be like, oh, whatever. I mean, if you were playing an asshole in a movie and you're going to be like that for 3 months, so like that would be
tough.
Rating, yeah.
But if you're a young Bob Dylan pre,
that'd be kind of fun.
I don't know. What was he like? That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
A little pretentious. I get it.
Yeah. All right. So what are we gonna grade? It's very easy. I know you're gonna grade.
There's no suspense here.
Yeah.
It's always going to be a 10. I dread the day that I can quote this movie inside out, and well, actually, I do in several parts. But anyway, I never want to wear myself out of this movie, so I'm going to be careful about how often I revisit it. But I do have this glorious 4K to crack open someday and watch. But I imagine I'll let it collect a little bit of dust. But every time I've seen this movie, I've liked it more and more. It gets a 10.
Well, lucky for you, I think, even if you take a lot of time away from it, I think it's got a timeless quality where it won't ever. I don't think it'll ever age out. I mean,
I don't think so either.
I think he's made something that'll be pretty timeless, and whether in story-wise, look-wise, I mean, it's always going to be one of those movies that could look like it came out a year ago, even if you're watching it like 5-10 years from now.
Yeah.
So that's something to be said about that.
You're right.
If we're getting Letterboxd scores, I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5, and I can't really explain why that little knock is off. But
nothing wrong. That score is fantastic. Like,
but guys, considering where I was at a long time ago when I used to watch it, I definitely felt something, like I said, much different this time around. So I think it was beneficial, like having to watch it so far removed from when I watched it last, and also watching it by myself. I think that might help with a few movies I've been iffy about. If I just maybe I just watch it alone and like get a different
that's
perspective
how I watch the
on
bulk of my movies. Maybe not so much going forward, but I love sitting down. That's when I get probably the best experience out of my movies, when I watch them by myself. Not always, not with a movie like this that I love and want to share. But it like you said, there's just something. Sometimes you just are able to be more vulnerable with a movie. Like I don't really like shed tears much when I'm watching a movie with other people. a movie like this, when I watch it by myself, like there's no way I'm making it through those scenes that we talked about earlier without, and it just watching something solo, you just have a vulnerability, which I think is like important if you're really invested in what you're watching.
Yeah.
So yeah, it doesn't surprise me that you kind of came out more enjoying it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, and I'm glad you picked it, or I'm glad I reminded you that you wanted to do it, or however it worked.
I'm glad we covered it.
Yeah, for sure. Wow, this is episode 213 of Back to the Blockbuster, which is mostly my fault because I released all those Tales of Horror episodes in a row. But still works out. And we were talking Interstellar for its 10th anniversary. So I think the next time you'll hear Jackson is most likely on a Christmas episode that we kind of talked about before. We did cover Black Christmas last year. That was the first time we watched it. But I did mention that there is a remake of Black Christmas, and I never said it was great. I've actually learned to appreciate. I appreciate it for what it is now. But it'll be interesting for us to kind of compare them together. And then this is the 2006 remake, not the remake in name only. We're not going to even touch that one.
No.
So that'll probably be the next one. And once he's done with classes, I'm gonna I just thought about it while we were talking about Interstellar. There is an anniversary in December that I kind of want to do with Jackson. I was just thinking about it while we were talking about this.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can fit that in once he's done. And we're almost at the end of the year. And
we're getting there.
We're almost at the end of the year. Jackson's almost done doing his thing. He's almost going to be back to regularly being back on the show. And,
2 more weeks as of this recording, specifically.
If you guys are feeling it, I feel it too. My Mondays aren't the same without recording with Jackson anymore. And even though everyone that has helped out has been really great, and
absolutely,
and they have kept the momentum going for us as well. So I don't want to feel like I'm not appreciative of it, but it's different. Like you're
I get what you're saying.
Part of the DNA of the show. So so very close. And by the way, I know I wasn't living your life there, but it's gone by. It seems like faster than I thought it would. So,
well, that's reassuring. It has here where I'm at too. I'm in a different province. It's been long days and quick weeks. My program's almost done, and I don't know really where the time has gone. It felt like just the other day I had all this in front of me, and now I'm almost done this 4 months, and really excited to be done. Love my time here, but I'm excited to be back home in my regular schedule, and then to come back and be able to do the show a lot more and go back to the way things run smoothly. But yeah, needless to say, it won't be too much longer. So very happy about that.
Well, that's something you guys can look forward to, is hearing Jackson on a more regular basis very soon. If you want to hear more Back to the Blockbuster, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, all very great. But you should also find us on the Playlist Studio app, because they are a podcast network, and they do a lot of the heavy lifting for us, and we want to take care of them too. So make sure you check them out there. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. We will be doing a lot more of that too in the new year as well. So even though it may not be a complete page right now, just subscribe so you're ready for all the content that will be going there in the new year. And as always, thank you, Jackson, for making this work. I know it's pretty late over there. And thank you for rearranging. I mean, we both were trying to get this episode done, and I ran into for people that know LA traffic is brutal. That's what happened to me on Sunday. So we weren't able to record it then. And then we had scheduled for Wednesday, and then Jackson got busy. It happens a lot, but we pivot and make it work. So
exactly.
Glad
it's a Thursday episode.
And with it done, and it's on Thanksgiving, and or American Thanksgiving, sorry,
right.
for us people in the States. So as always, it's a pleasure doing these episodes with you. Thank you for talking Interstellar with me, and we'll do it again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for listening, guys, and take care. Hopefully you enjoyed the episode.